The void of space expanded endlessly in every direction around the colossal Zephyrian armada. Admiral Vexar stood firm upon the bridge of his flagship, the Void Piercer, watching hundreds of biomechanical warships drift through the Kepler 442 system like a vast swarm of metal-borne predators. The sight stirred pride and fierce satisfaction in him. For 3 centuries, his species had commanded this quadrant of the galaxy, and today promised another conquest added to their long legacy of domination. The system's third world gleamed blue and green in the distance, overflowing with rare elements that powered Zephyrian technology. Scouts had confirmed what sensors already displayed. Only primitive creatures wandered across the surface. No rival civilizations, no planetary defenses, no orbital batteries. The easiest conquest of his career. "Admiral, fleet remains in flawless formation," reported his second, a younger officer whose biosuit gleamed from recent upgrades. "All 217 vessels remain combat-ready and prepared for planetary subjugation." Vexar inclined his head, tentacles rippling with anticipation. Each vessel within his armada reflected decades of genetic mastery and perfected warfare. Even the smallest held crews of over 500, while the flagship carried nearly 10,000 warriors. 17 different species had fallen before, with fleets half this strength. Meanwhile, beyond the fleet's perimeter, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan monitored from his station aboard the UNS Defiance. The human destroyer drifted unseen, its prototype stealth field masking it from nearly all known sensors. Jake's fingers glided across his console with instinctive precision as he shadowed the vast alien force. "Captain, you'll want to see this," Jake called, voice taut with unease. Captain Lisa Morgan approached, her boots clicking against the metal deck. Young for a command officer, but her reputation was earned through unbroken records in the Outer Rim campaigns. Defiance was her first command, achieved by relentless years of service and battle-tested decisions. "What do we have, Jake?" she asked, leaning close to study his console. "Zephyrian Grand Fleet, Captain. I count over 200 hulls vectoring toward the inhabited planet. Standard invasion alignment." Lisa's gut tightened. That world below held nearly 50,000 human settlers who had arrived barely 5 years earlier. They'd built farms, schools, scattered towns across 3 continents. And they had no defense, only a few security details with basic firearms. "Range?" Lisa asked. 47,000 kilometers closing on us. They haven't spotted us yet, but soon they will." She eyed the tactical map, thoughts racing through choices. By protocol, she should retreat, transmit the threat coordinates back to command, yet the closest base was 3 weeks away at full burn. By then, the colony would lie in ruin. "Captain," Jake said, quieter now. "There's more. Their formation matches archive records from Vega." Lisa's blood froze. Every officer remembered Vega. 2 decades before, a Zephyrian fleet struck a mining colony in that system. When human ships finally arrived, they uncovered mass graves filled with 30,000 murdered civilians. The Zephyrians had slaughtered everyone, deemed useless to their bio-war factories. "Jake, I want full breakdown of their formation. Time before bombardment range?" 6 hours at present velocity." Lisa stepped to the command dais, meeting the eyes of her crew. Engineer Amy Turner balanced their fragile stealth core. Weapons officer Carlos Martinez tested the ship's limited arsenal. Communications tech Ryan Clark fought through heavy jamming, searching for any outbound channel. Defiance carried only 180 souls, each forged by relentless training and trial. They were the best she had, and Lisa knew they depended on her judgment now. The problem was, every option ended in sacrifice. Suddenly, alarms wailed throughout the Zephyrian host. On the Void Piercer's bridge, Vexar turned, bewildered, as sensor crews scrambled across their stations. "Report!" he barked, his voice honed by centuries of conquest. Admiral, unknown contact detected bearing 27 Mark V. The reading is irregular. Vexar's bulk loomed over the bioluminescent consoles, casting shifting shadows. The data defied explanation. A small vessel, no larger than a Zephyrian scout, but radiating an energy signature utterly foreign. Classification? Vexar demanded. The operator's tentacles shook as he worked. Sir, the computer fails to match the design. Its entire frame is metallic, not biological. Propulsion is unknown, but... The officer faltered, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Computer suggests... human. The bridge went deathly still. An ancient instinctual terror rippled through every Zephyrian present. A hereditary memory carried through bloodlines for centuries. For 300 years, their species had lived knowing, somewhere in the dark void, humanity endured. Impossible, Vexar growled, but with no certainty. Run it again! Admiral, I've run it 17 times. The energy curves, hull form, quantum traces, they all align with human theoretical profiles. It is a human warship. Panic swept through the Zephyrian fleet like fire through dry grass. Commanders who had never suffered defeat found themselves, haunted by the tales told to them as children, of the species that had once broken their empire utterly. Across dozens of decks, crews scrambled to check weapons and shields in nervous haste. And aboard the Defiance, Lisa watched their unraveling with widening eyes. They're flawless. The formation was beginning to falter as ships shifted into scattered defensive alignments. Several vessels were actually pulling back from the lone human destroyer, despite outnumbering it by more than 1,000 to 1. Captain, Jake whispered, awe in his tone. They're afraid of us. Lisa realized she was watching something extraordinary unfold. These conquerors who had enslaved civilizations and dominated entire sectors were recoiling at the presence of a single human vessel. The same legends children repeated in classrooms were apparently nightmares for their enemies. Amy, status on the stealth drive? Lisa asked. Not good, Captain. The last jump strained the system hard. I can hold concealment for maybe an hour, but after that we'll light up every scanner in the system. Lisa decided. If the Zephyrians already feared them, perhaps fear could be forged into a weapon. She remembered historical accounts of Commander Rick Hayes when he faced insurmountable odds. Perhaps it was time to remind the stars why humans were feared. All hands, this is your captain. We're about to attempt something reckless, but I need your complete trust. Jake, chart an intercept vector into the center of their formation. The bridge officers exchanged quick glances, but none spoke against her. They were human, and humanity had never been known to retreat from battle, no matter how hopeless the odds appeared. Admiral Vexar studied the strange readings, his thoughts racing through 3 centuries of remembered history. The fear flooding his crews was not baseless hysteria, but the ingrained terror of a species that had learned about human ferocity through blood. He shut his eyes, recalling the stories his grandfather told, stories etched into every Zephyrian's mind from childhood. 3 centuries ago, their empire had stood at its greatest height. They commanded 40 star systems and enslaved 17 other races. Their biotech fleets swept outward like a consuming tide, imposing Zephyrian dominion upon every world encountered. They saw themselves as apex predators ruling over prey. The first meeting with humans seemed routine. Long-range probes uncovered a remote colony on a frontier world named New Texas, a barren planet home to miners and farmers who had fled the inner core systems. The settlers had no fleets, no planetary shields, no links to powerful governments. Ideal targets for chains and servitude. Commander Rick Hayes was running standard patrols through the Outer Rim when he intercepted the desperate call for help from New Texas. His ship, the UNS Retribution, was a prototype fitted with experimental military technology. Hayes commanded only 200 crew, yet they embodied the finest warriors and minds humanity produced. When he reached New Texas, he found the Zephyrian Third Fleet already entrenched in orbit. 15 massive bioships floated like grotesque insects, their living hulls pulsing with organic light. Below, colonists were being corralled into transport pods by alien soldiers. Families shuffled in chains toward enslavement. Any rational commander would have withdrawn, calling for reinforcements. The Zephyrian fleet had razed entire systems. Each vessel housed thousands of fighters and weapons capable of shattering worlds. Hayes was outnumbered 15-1 with no chance of aid or survival. Instead, Hayes executed a maneuver no Zephyrian had ever witnessed. He struck without hesitation. No demands, no parley, no restraint. The retribution hurled itself into the core of their formation like a thunderbolt cast by the gods themselves. The opening strike annihilated the first Zephyrian warship instantly. Hayes had studied their biodesign and discovered a fatal flaw. The neural cluster controlling their organic architecture was exposed to directed energy strikes. A precise hit severed the bond between the ship's living brain and its body, leaving it adrift and lifeless. But what unnerved the Zephyrians wasn't the single loss. It was the way the humans fought. Their tactics defied logic, ignored doctrine, and shredded every expectation of war. They attacked from angles thought impossible, slammed their own hull into enemy ships, and displayed utter disregard for survival. Cornered, they grew more deadly, not less. Hayes unleashed a doctrine that would later be taught in military academies across human space. He harnessed the gravity well of New Texas as a weapon, slingshotting retribution around the planet at breakneck velocity to gain crushing kinetic force. Then he drove the ship directly into the largest Zephyrian dreadnought, its reinforced hull slicing through alien bioarmor as if it were paper. The psychological shock was catastrophic. Zephyrian crews began committing critical errors as fear overtook discipline. Vessels collided as captains tried to avoid the phantom-like human craft that struck like a ghost. Entire crews collapsed into hysteria, some abandoning their posts in madness. Within 15 minutes, Hayes had obliterated 8 ships and crippled the other 7 so severely they could hardly hold orbit. The remnants of the Third Fleet fled New Texas in ruin, abandoning their invasion force and their illusion of invulnerability. But Hayes refused to stop. Instead of rejoicing in triumph, he pursued the shattered Zephyrians across 3 neighboring systems, striking mercilessly at convoys and communications hubs. Whenever they regrouped, the human warship appeared from nothingness, destroying everything in reach. The hunt concluded at Zephyrian Prime, the cradle of their empire. Hayes brought his battered vessel into orbit above the homeworld and issued a declaration that carved itself into galactic memory. This is Commander Rick Hayes of the United Nations Navy. Your fleet has slaughtered human civilians. You have 24 hours to withdraw all military forces from human space and sign a binding non-aggression pact. Refuse, and I will show you what happens when humanity is enraged. At first, the High Command of Zephyr laughed. A single ship threatening an empire world sounded like the rant of a lunatic. Yet Hayes immediately proved them wrong. Employing precision targeting systems, he destroyed military strongholds with surgical accuracy, sparing civilian sectors entirely. Each strike was flawless, every target eliminated without collateral ruin. The warning was unmistakable. If Hayes could dismantle hardened military targets with such control, he could as easily reverse that restraint and annihilate civilian centers. The Zephyrians understood instantly they faced a people with both the weapons and the will to erase their civilization if provoked. Within 6 hours, the High Command capitulated to all Hayes's demands. They withdrew forces from contested regions, signed the treaty, and created demilitarized zones at humanity's borders. Far more lasting, they carried the tale to every other race they encountered. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And now, 300 years later, Admiral Vexar faced the inheritors of those same legends. His sensors confirmed the dread every officer carried within their bones. Somewhere in the endless dark, a human warship stalked them with the same ruthless calculation Rick Hayes had shown at New Texas. Vexar turned toward his communications officer, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Transmit to Fleet Command. Inform them we've encountered a human craft and are assuming defensive protocols. Sir, should we abandon the occupation?" The words pressed on the bridge like a weight. Vexar knew the correct answer was yes. Every Zephyrian manual outlined the rules of human contact: avoid, withdraw, retreat at all costs. Yet he also knew that failure here would end his career, branding him a coward to his people. "Maintain course," he ordered. "Tighten defensive screens and prepare for evasive action. If the humans want battle, then battle is what they'll receive." But deep inside, Vexar recognized the folly. The old stories spoke of human warships that fought like trapped predators, crews that chose death over submission, and doctrines that twisted impossible odds into victory. He was about to pit those legends against modern might, and he feared the humans would prove the stories were true. Captain Lisa Morgan stood steady at the heart of Defiance's bridge, watching the vast Zephyrian armada through the forward display. Every instinct from 15 years of service screamed at her to retreat and call reinforcements. Yet those instincts also told her that 50,000 colonists would perish if she turned away. "Jake, full tactical breakdown. I want their defenses and command relays mapped." Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's hands blurred across his console as he parsed incoming sensor feeds. "Captain, this is incredible. They're shifting into a defensive grid despite outnumbering us 1,000-fold. Their heavies are clustering around the flagship, while lighter craft are forming protective screens." Lisa watched the adjustments with growing astonishment. The Zephyrians were treating her solitary destroyer like an entire fleet. Their fear had warped logic into paranoia. "Amy, status on our cloak?" she called to her chief engineer. Turner looked up from her console, sweat streaking despite the chill air. "Not good, Captain. The quantum field cores took a hit in our last jump. I can keep concealment stable for maybe 40 minutes. After that, we'll flare bright to every scanner." "Weapons, Carlos." Martinez's fingers tapped across. "Diagnostics, checking each system. We're fully loaded on torpedo launchers and our energy batteries are peaked. But, Captain, supplies are limited. Against a fleet this large, we last maybe 10 minutes tops." Lisa inclined her head, calculating. Options. Doctrine-dictated hit-and-run tactics when facing overwhelming forces. But that required escape, and their cloak was fading while long-range comms were drowned by enemy jammers. Escape was impossible. "Ryan, anything on their comms?" she asked. Communications Officer Ryan Clark adjusted his headset, isolating the streams spilling across the battle space. "Captain, their command net's chaos. Panic chatter everywhere. Several captains are begging to retreat, and at least 3 ships have broken formation without clearance." A spark of hope lit in Lisa's chest. If the Zephyrians' fear was already obvious, and Lisa knew she might be able to turn that fear into a weapon. Humanity's first encounters with alien species had taught her one vital lesson. Psychological warfare often broke enemies faster than firepower. "Jake, plot a straight intercept course for the center of their formation. Target their flagship." The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. Lieutenant Ben Crawford, the tactical officer, finally spoke. "Captain, that path takes us straight through their fleet. Even with stealth, they'll have firing solutions from every angle." "I'm counting on that," Lisa replied. "Amy, maximum power to engines, but keep the stealth field intact." "Yes, ma'am, but it'll cut our stealth time in half." "Do it." "Ryan, prepare a transmission for broadcast across all Zephyrian military channels. I want every ship to hear it." Lisa moved to communications, forcing her voice to stay steady despite her pounding heart. This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the UNS Defiance. You are violating Treaty 77 Alpha, which forbids military action against human civilians. You have 30 minutes to withdraw or face the consequences. This is your only warning. Send it? Ryan asked. Send it on all frequencies. The message flashed through space at light speed. On the bridge of the Void Piercer, Admiral Vexar listened in silence. The human captain's voice carried unshakable certainty, as if one destroyer truly could force back an entire fleet. Admiral, how should we respond? His second-in-command asked. Vexar studied the tactical readout. The human vessel was moving with calm precision, cutting through his formation toward the flagship. Even as he gave orders to maintain position, he saw panic creeping through his fleet. Captains were hesitating. Crews were faltering. Ships that had conquered star systems were retreating from a single destroyer. Aboard the Defiance, Lisa watched, with growing confidence. Her gamble was working. Discipline was breaking, and entire cruisers were drifting toward the outskirts of formation. Stealth field weakening, Amy warned. Maybe 10 minutes left. That's enough. Jake, adjust course past their 3 biggest cruisers. I want them to see us. Ma'am, that puts us inside firing range of 50 ships. I know. Ben, bring electronic warfare systems online. If they lock on, drown. They're sensors in false data. Lisa knew the risk. She was gambling the lives of her crew. But she also knew humanity's reputation had been built on refusing surrender, on making the impossible possible. The Zephyrians expected her to retreat. Instead, she would drive straight into their heart and dare them to act. If the legends still carried weight, if 3 centuries of fear remained alive, then one small destroyer might terrify an entire fleet into retreat. The next minutes would decide whether Captain Lisa Morgan's name became immortal or whether it was lost with her ship. Either way, the Zephyrians would never forget Ryan. Clark adjusted his headset, filtering through the alien chatter spilling across the void. Captain, their command net is in chaos. I'm detecting panic on multiple channels. Several captains are begging to retreat, and at least 3 ships have already broken formation. A spark of hope flared in Lisa's chest. If the Zephyrians were already this terrified, then maybe fear itself could be her weapon. Humanity's history was clear. Psychological warfare had often achieved what firepower could not. Jake, plot an intercept course straight through their formation. Target their flagship. The bridge fell into uneasy silence. Tactical Officer Ben Crawford finally spoke. Captain, that puts us directly through their fleet. Even with stealth, every ship will have a firing solution. I'm counting on that. Amy, can you give me full engine power without collapsing the stealth field? Yes, ma'am, but it'll cut stealth time in half. Do it. Ryan, prep a broadcast across all Zairian military bands. Every ship must hear this. Lisa stepped to the comms console, forcing calm into her voice, though her chest thundered. This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the UNS Defiance. You are in violation of Treaty 77 Alpha, which forbids military strikes against human civilians. You have 30 minutes to withdraw or face consequences. This is your only warning. Send it? Ryan asked. Send it. All channels. The transmission shot outward at light speed, reaching the Zephyrian fleet in moments. On the bridge of the Void Piercer, Admiral Vexar listened, his hearts caught between admiration and dread. The human captain spoke with conviction so absolute, it sounded as though one destroyer truly could force back his armada. Admiral, your orders? His second pressed. BXR watched the tactical screen. The human ship carved deeper into their formation with unwavering precision, as if hundreds of warships surrounding it meant nothing. Sir, multiple outer ships request permission to retreat, the comms officer reported. Denied. Hold positions and prepare for combat. But Vexar could see it, the infection of fear spreading through his fleet. Ships that had raised star systems were shrinking back. Captains who had never known defeat were fumbling at their weapons in nervous haste. Aboard the Defiance, Lisa studied their hesitation with growing confidence. Her gamble was working. Entire Zaharian cruisers were drifting outward, discipline unraveling under the weight of old fears. "Captain, stealth field unstable," Amy warned. "Maybe 10 minutes left." "That's enough." "Jake, alter course. Past their 3 largest cruisers. I want them to see us." "Ma'am, that's within range of 50 ships." "I know. Ben, bring electronic warfare systems online. If they try to lock, drown their sensors and false signals." Lisa understood. The risk. She was betting every life aboard the Defiance. But humanity had never won by following rules other species obeyed. The Zafirians expected retreat, negotiation, surrender. Instead, she would hurl her ship straight into their core and dare them to stop her. If legends held true, if centuries of conditioning still haunted them, then one destroyer might break an armada. The coming minutes would decide whether Lisa Morgan's name was etched into history or erased with her ship. Either way, the Zafirians would never forget, and when it was over, the galaxy itself would carry the echoes. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the last Zafirian vessels vanish into hyperspace, their organic hulls limping away. Like wounded beasts before a predator they could not comprehend. The tactical board displayed the wreckage of 37 brutal minutes of combat. 63 enemy ships lay ruined, their neural links severed by precise human fire. 41 more fled under critical damage. The scattered remnants of what had once been a proud armada drifted across 3 star systems, their surviving crews left to whisper tales no one would believe. "Damage report?" Lisa asked, her voice raw from shouting orders. Chief Engineer Amy Turner lifted her head, streaked with sweat and grease. "Hits on decks 4 through 7, but the hull's intact. Engines at 60%. We've lost 2 torpedo tubes. Casualties light. 12 wounded. No fatalities." Relief washed over Lisa. She had expected to lose half her crew. Instead, they had endured. Not by chance, but by the unyielding strength of her team. Together, they had turned certain slaughter into humanity's most decisive victory in 3 centuries. The enemy fleet? Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan scanned his sensors one last time before giving his report. "All surviving Zaparian ships have moved out of range, still retreating. Admiral Vexar's flagship sustained critical damage but managed to flee with the final group. I doubt they'll return soon." Across the system, Admiral Vexar sat in the wreckage of his command center aboard the Void Piercer, reading battle data that defied everything he understood about warfare. His flagship's biomechanical core was shutting down piece by piece, ruptured neural conduits flooding the ship's organic computer with errors. The human destroyer had executed tactics scholars would dissect for decades. Rather than annihilating ships directly, it struck their nervous systems with surgical accuracy. Every shot was chosen to cripple, not obliterate, leaving maximum chaos, with minimal destruction. It was warfare elevated to an art form, but what unsettled Vexar most wasn't human technology or precision. It was the certainty with which they fought. Captain Morgan and her crew had faced hopeless odds without faltering, as though victory had been inevitable. They hadn't fought for survival. They had staged a demonstration of human dominance. "Admiral, High Command requests a complete account," said his comm officer, one of the few left conscious after the biosystem backlash. "Tell them I need time to gather accurate readings," Vexar answered, though he knew no delay could make sense of this defeat. How could he explain the way the human ship glided through his formation as if in a choreographed dance? How could he rationalize the exact strikes that rendered their strongest warships into drifting wrecks in minutes? On the Defiance, Communications Officer Ryan Clark worked feverishly to restore long-range comms. Several relays were damaged, but he found success by amplifying their signal through the crippled Zaparian vessel nearby. "Captain, Fleet Command is answering. Admiral Tony Grant requests contact." Lisa adjusted her uniform and approached the console. Grant had been her mentor in her early service years, and she knew he would demand a full account of Kepler 442. The view screen lit, revealing Admiral Grant on the bridge of the UNS Sovereign. Behind him, the Sovereign's crew stared at her, with awe and respect. "Captain Morgan, I've seen initial figures from your clash with the Zephyrian Grand Fleet. Tell me these numbers are correct. If so, you've made history." "They're accurate, Admiral. We engaged more than 200 Zephyrian vessels and forced them into retreat with severe casualties. The colonists are secure." Grant leaned back, shaking his head. "Lisa, do you realize what this means? The psychological shock will transform humanity's standing across this sector. Reports are already spreading. The Altarian Republic seeks peace talks, and the Riel Confederation is offering trade." Lisa felt pride mingled with exhaustion. She had saved colonists and safeguarded human space, yet sensed the ripples of her actions would reach far beyond. "Admiral, we require immediate aid for repairs and rotation. My crew is spent and can't maintain readiness. Reinforcements are inbound, Captain. The Third Fleet is en route. Will arrive within 6 hours." When the channel closed, Lisa studied her crew. Every face reflected relief and disbelief. They had done the impossible and proven humanity's reputation was more than ancient myth. Weapons Officer Carlos Martinez broke the silence. "Captain, what happens now? This battle will echo across the galaxy. Every species will rethink their stance on humanity." "That isn't our concern, Carlos. We're soldiers, not diplomats. Our duty was protecting civilians, and we succeeded. What comes next is for leaders above us." Yet even as she said it, Lisa knew they had stepped into something far larger. The Battle of Kepler 442 would stand beside the legends of Rick Hayes and other heroes. Future officers would study their maneuvers. Most of all, the galaxy was reminded of one truth: humans were different. They didn't withdraw before overwhelming odds. They didn't surrender in the face of certain defeat. They fought with everything for their people's survival. The Zephyrian Empire had learned that centuries ago, and now the galaxy was reminded again. The UNS Defiance pressed on through the outer rim, its crew of 80 heading toward whatever awaited in the dark. Behind them, the shattered fleet remained, a testament to human resolve and a warning to any who threatened them.